Okay, I think we are now all good to go. Thank you all so much for your patience while we get that sorted out. Everyone, it is my immense pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker of the 2021 Sci Access Conference, Sirisha Bandla, who is a Virgin Galactic astronaut and the Vice President of Government Affairs and Research Operations. On July 11th, 2021, Sirisha flew to space aboard the Virgin Galactic Unity 22 test flight alongside fellow crew member Sir Richard Branson, becoming the second woman born in India to ever travel to space. Sirisha currently works as the Vice President of Government Affairs and Research Operations. In this role, she oversees legislative, regulatory, and government business priorities for the company, as well as work with research customers to fly science and technology experiments on Virgin Galactic's SpaceShip class of vehicles. Sirisha, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Anna. So glad to be here. My name is Sirisha Bandla. I'm South Asian, actually born in India and moved to the US very young. And I'm joining you guys from my home office, which is just a spare bedroom in my house during the pandemic. I need to think of more creative backgrounds instead of just a white wall. But there is a little bit of my one plant that didn't die while I was out training for space still here in my background, which I'm proud of. So I'm so excited to talk to everyone. I'm going to have a small presentation, and then I'm really looking forward to the Q&A and having a discussion. It's really my favorite part of presenting and speaking. So in my presentation, I will go through just who I am, how I got here, because I was listening into the last amazing panel and saw just a really great discussion on pathways to within industry, going to space, being a part of not only flight, but science and research. And I love the conversation. I just want to talk a little bit about how I ended up at Galactic, because it wasn't anything I had planned. And it wasn't traditional in a sense, but what is traditional these days? So just talk about that. And then I will then talk about Virgin Galactic, what we're doing, and then talk a little bit about the space flight in July, and then open it up for questions. And my pronouns, I just realized it's not on my Zoom, so I apologize, are she and her. Thank you. So I will change that once I figure out how to work a Zoom. Let's see, next slide, Zoom, please. All right, so none of my slides actually really contribute to my talk. It's a little bit of a comfort for me as an engineer to always have slides. I will hopefully kick that in the future, but until then, I just have some background. If any of the slides actually are of substance, I will definitely talk a little bit more about them. But I just wanted to first start off with, why I joined Galactic. Virgin Galactic's mission is to open space up for all. And I know that's a very broad statement, but as more and more people go to space, we hope to see the diversity of those people increase. And we're not talking about just, how they look. It's their backgrounds, it's their culture, it's how they experience life. That diversity must increase. And we hope to see that increase as we fly more and more people to space. And I truly believe that increase in diversity is going to have a profound impact on not only the next generation, but people living on Earth, their perception of our planet and their perception of life on Earth. I truly believe that. And it's not only that trip to space, but it's the entire experience. It's the training, it's the flight, it's the view of Earth, and it's everything that you do afterward that's encompassed in why we go. So that's really why I joined the company. And I'll talk about how I got there, because it was not in my original plan. And sorry, one more sidebar. It never fails that my dog barks whenever I do a keynote. So hopefully he does not bark during this keynote, but I apologize in advance. Chance the Yapper. He always lives up to his name. So I'm one of those people that have always wanted to go to space. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be an astronaut. And being that type of person, I really just kind of plotted out a plan for how I'd get there. So, young Sirisha in her mind was like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to become a fighter pilot. I'm going to go to NASA, and then I'm going to go to space. I was like, what could go wrong? That seems like a very logical path, because that is the path I saw everybody before me take. Seemed like the pathway to success. So that is how I plotted out my plan. That being said, I think we all know hardly ever does life go to plan, and hardly ever is it linear. So for me, what changed my trajectory, there's quite a few, but let me just talk about the biggest one, was my eyesight. I had bad eyesight since I was a child, but it was getting worse gradually. And around high school was when it went past the point where I was eligible to even apply to be an astronaut. And I honestly remember that day at the optometrist when I got my new prescription. And of course, me being me, I had memorized the qualifications for being an NASA astronaut. So I knew as soon as I saw my prescription, I had crossed that line. So it was quite devastating for someone that had plotted out their life in such a simplistic manner. So I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do and, where I could go from here. And coincidentally, that same year in high school, in 2004, the Anasari X Prize happened. And the Anasari X Prize was a competition basically that was awarding a prize for the first private spacecraft to go to space twice within 2 weeks. And SpaceShip 1 from Scaled Composites won that prize. And I remember seeing that on TV. And I also remember Sir Richard Branson, after the completion of the X Prize, standing up and making this grand announcement saying, I'm starting a company. It's going to be called Virgin Galactic, and it's going to be a space line for all. I want to make space. I want to open up space for all. And I saw that and I was like, all right, I have a new plan, but that's how I'm going to get to space. I'm going to work for Virgin Galactic. So my new plan didn't really work out very well. I remember, I'll just say it took a lot of turns, a lot of ups and downs. It didn't really go exactly how I thought. I ended up going to Purdue. I ended up graduating. Let me take a step back. At Purdue, I had an incredible opportunity to fly parabolic flights and do science for NASA. But after graduating Purdue, I actually went and worked for a defense company, worked on fighter jets, which I still was in love with. Then while I was at that company, my professor called me and said, hey, do you want to take this job in DC? It's a policy job. It's for a trade association working with commercial space companies. So Sirisha, me not knowing anything about policy at all, said, sure, I would love to. So then I went to DC with zero policy knowledge, working for a trade association that had, SpaceX and Blue Origin and Bigelow and Virgin Galactic, all of those companies as part of the organization. It was really an incredible opportunity to go in and work on the ground on policies in the beginning, of industry, when the industry was still quite small and wasn't launching as frequently as you see today. I learned quite a lot from it, and I'm actually really, really glad I took that jump, because I didn't realize this was a career path, and I didn't realize how much I loved policy. I really liked being in the thick of it and working on strategy for growth. So after that, I can't say I was offered a job at Virgin Galactic right off the bat. But I lobbied, using my lobbying skills, I lobbied my way into the company and got a job in their Washington, D.C. office. Being there, I worked, on the policies side for Virgin Galactic, regulatory work with the FAA, worked with the Hill on legislation, and worked with NASA since they are a customer of our service. And while at the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, I had worked on suborbital policy using microgravity. Sorry, let me start over. I worked on a group called the Suborbital Applications Researchers Group, which is a group that looked at the new commercial services that were coming online and how to utilize them for science, technology development, and education. So while at Galactic, I melded that into my portfolio and was given the opportunity to work with the research community to fly science and technology development payloads on the vehicle as well. And it melded, the work that I did at Purdue, which is more engineering technical work, and the policy side that I got from the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. And it directly led into me being qualified and selected for the Unity 22 flight, because on that flight, I tested the ability to conduct research on board. So again, it was not a linear line that I thought would lead to me going to space. It wasn't the plan that I had thought. There was a lot of learning for me personally, on what I liked, what I didn't like, and just my personality. Sometimes it's very hard for me to pivot, but I've learned quite a lot that it's just as valuable to learn what you don't like as much as what you do like, and it can lead to new opportunities. It can lead to new jobs, and it also led to quite a lot of people that I've met along the way that have showed me that engineering isn't what I initially thought. Space flight and commercial space isn't what I initially thought, and all of them have been for the better. So let me talk a little bit about what Virgin Galactic is before I jump into my flight. So just for people that don't know, Virgin Galactic operates what we call a hybrid system. It's a system that's made up of an aircraft and a spacecraft, so it's really unique. The aircraft itself, its primary role is to carry our spacecraft to its release altitude, and the spacecraft, its primary role is to take people to space. But it takes 4 to 6 people to space, and both vehicles are piloted. And of course, to talk about my other side of the portfolio, it can also take research payloads to space, and they're typically autonomous until recently, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I'm really, really excited that we have the ability to do human-tended research, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So Virgin Galactic is offering a few different products, I would say. I think most people know that we offer tourism flights, so our future astronauts can buy a ticket and have an entire experience, be part of the community, train, take their flight to space, and then they are in this astronaut community where we at Virgin Galactic are still engaged and are especially interested in how they're using that experience back in their communities, and are hoping to help them as much as we can along the way. As well as we have flights for research payloads, science, technology development payloads that are autonomous, payloads that you can interact with that are human-tended. And then we have another product offering, which is a professional astronaut training, which is you can buy out the whole flight and use that for training purposes, research purposes as well. Our manufacturing operations are in Mojave, California. It's where we are manufacturing a fleet of spaceships, which it's really exciting to say. It shows where we're going in the future. This is a product that is going to be flying often, which is going to be providing many more opportunities for people to go into space and for research and science to go into space. And we operate out of New Mexico, just north of Truth or Consequences. Well, sorry, north of Las Cruces, south of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. So we're kind of right by White Sands National Park. It's a great place to fly out of, and New Mexico itself is beautiful. It's a great departure point on Earth, in my opinion. So we have this great facility called the Gateway to Space, where all of our future astronauts come and train, and all of our researchers come and prep their payloads ahead of flight. And then just to give you a quick concept of operations on what our flight entails. So on flight day, you would board the vehicle. The vehicle would take off in this mated configuration, which is where the spaceship and the aircraft are still together and mated. Take off from a runway like a normal aircraft. Then we go up to about 45,000 feet, do all of our safety checks. And once we have completed those checks, mothership releases the spaceship. Spaceship drops for a few seconds before igniting its rocket motor. And the rocket motor then ignites. The spaceship turns up to space after being dropped. And the rocket motor burns for about 60 seconds. After a rocket motor cut off, the spaceship will then continue to coast upward. And that's when you'll have the microgravity time. That's typically when the researchers and the payloads we have on board take a lot of their data. That's also when anybody on board, once cleared to do so, can unbuckle. And if you're a researcher, you obviously have some things to do. If you're on there as a tourist, you can do whatever you want. You can go to a window, you can do some somersaults, as I did on my flight. But my personal recommendation would be to get to a window, any window. We have quite a few of them, and just take in the view. After that, we're on a suborbital trajectory, of course. So we re-enter and then land back at Spaceport America, or Spaceport, like a normal aircraft. And after that, I'd have to say one thing that's really unique is that it's not too long from landing to getting out. And if you have payloads that need to get to a laboratory pretty quickly, we can get them out as soon as we'll stop, which I think is really unique capability for the future. So my flight on July 11th, had the immense honor to fly with 3 of my crew members, Sir Richard Branson, Colin Bennett, and Beth Moses. So we all were on the flight to evaluate the cabin and the experience for future astronauts and researchers. Sir Richard Branson was evaluating particularly the tourism aspect. Colin Bennett is a flight test engineer and was evaluating the cabin. And Beth Moses was our chief astronaut instructor. So she actually trained us for the flight, and she did quite a great job, if I may say so myself. And then my role on this flight was to conduct research, to test the experience, the capability to do human-tended research. So interact with science, with technology payloads during the flight. So I carried a payload from University of Florida, and what they were looking at was the gene expressions of plants through different phases of the flight. They've actually flown, sorry, I'm going to skip this. They've actually flown multiple payloads that are similar to the ones I carried up to ISS and other platforms. But this was the first time they were able to look at how plants reacted to transitional environments, because during the flight, they'd go through, of course, 1G to high G to low G. So that was what they were really interested in looking at. So I took up samples of these plants. They're called Arabidopsis plants. that were genetically modified to express certain genes that would then be able to be imaged later in a lab. And what I did was I had them in these tubes where one end was the plant sample and the other end had a fixative. So during different phases of the flight, I would actuate this tube, and the fixative and the plant would basically be pushed together, and the plant would basically frozen in the state it was in when I actuated the tube, so that later in the lab, the researchers could take a look at the genes being expressed in that moment. So on my flight, I had 3 of them strapped to my leg. So if anyone saw the flight and saw this big white bag strapped to my leg, that was where I was housing the Kennedy fixation tubes, or KFTs. So the first one I did during the mated portion, where we were on our way to 45,000 feet. So I actuated one of those as basically a control. The second one I actuated right after the high G portion. So right after rocket motor cutoff, while I was still strapped in, seated, and we were coasting up to our apogee, I was able to take one out and actuate that one. And then the final one, I actuated at the end of the weightlessness period. So right before I got back into my seat, took the final one out, actuated, and got back into my seat, strapped in, and got ready for reentry. So that was the timeline for me. And in between the second and the third KFTs, Colin and I had quite a few tasks to do in the cabin. So if you saw me in any of the videos, there's a couple of videos of me doing some somersaults. Well, very fun. It was actually part of my task card to look at doing those kinds of acrobatics in the cabin, the ability to move around easily in the cabin, to orient myself in the cabin. So it was work, but it was a lot of fun, if I do say so myself. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the flight. I just wanted to end with just a couple thoughts. As of this last SpaceX launch, we've had 601 people in space. And it still blows my mind with, how long we've had the ability to put humans in space, that we've only sent 601 people. And if you break those numbers down, and I'm just going to say one data point because I am working on the rest of the data point, but of those 601, 73 have been women. And if you break that down even by even further demographics, the number just gets smaller and smaller. And this is not representative of human beings on Earth. And it is really my hope, and I'm really excited to see more and more people go to space, just so we can get those different mindsets and different skill sets and different experiences in space and then back in our communities. The number one question I get asked is, how was space? What did you think? How was the view? And I struggle because the only thing I can think of is I say it's incredible. I just cannot think of another way to capture it. The image I'm showing right now is a picture caught on one of the GoPro cameras of me looking out the window. And it's caught my gaze really at the first time during this flight, I was able to get to a window and just take a look and take it in. And it probably captures it better than me just saying it was incredible. But I just cannot think of another word. But I cannot wait until we send a poet or a professional communicator up into space. They're going to come down and be able to describe their feelings, their emotions, the view in such a better way than I ever could. And I cannot wait. I think it's going to be, again, have a profound effect on not only our next generation, but the people that we surround ourselves in our communities, just a profound effect on how we view our life on Earth. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about anything I talked about or anything I didn't talk about. and excited to have a discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sirisha. That is absolutely amazing. And we have lots of questions pouring in. So I'll go ahead and let us get started answering some of those. So the first question we have is from Amrita, who says, I am 14 and want to know if I can go to space as a 14-year-old.
So unfortunately, as of right now, no, just because of FAA regulations. But I am hoping it's one of those things as we start flying more and more people to space, we see, we honestly get a feel for processes, training, we can expand the aperture of the people going to space hopefully very quickly. So as of now, no, because of FAA regs, but I really do hope in the future that that age limit will go down.
What's the current age limit?
I believe it's 18, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool, thank you. Next question is from Rachel, who asks, how long did it take to train to fly with Virgin Galactic, and who led the training? And can you tell us anything more about that experience?
Yeah, so I trained a little bit more than our typical future astronaut will, just because me and my crewmates were testing the experience and evaluating the cabin. So a typical future astronaut will arrive at the facility around 5 days ahead of time. And the training encompasses, the training is very comprehensive. Of course, you look at the operational items of the vehicle, what's important in the vehicle, emergency procedures, how to get around the vehicle, operating your, donning your parachute, all of those operational items. But the other part of the training is getting to know your crew. During this whole process, you're with your crew and you get to know the people that you're going to have this experience with. And I would say the final part of the training, which was unexpected for me, but there goes Champ the Yapper. I apologize if you can hear my dog.
Amazing name, by the way. Incredible.
It's crazy, but I love him. The one part of the training that surprised me the most is a training that I'm trying to see the right way to put this. It was training to really take in the experience, talking to people that have gone to space, talking to Beth, talking to the pilots. It really helped me be prepared for what I was going to see. Everyone reacts to the view and the experience in a different way, but I was prepared to take it in. And I was not, there's always that like emotional overload, but it wasn't so much that I didn't remember everything. It was just enough that I was prepared to take it in, was able to like really think about how I felt. And of course, yeah, it was the part of the training I didn't realize I would have, but I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Amazing. Elizabeth asks, I'm interested to know more about your research findings. Do the researchers find any changes in gene expression with the plants exposed to different space environments? Were there any genes expressed differently than on Earth?
So that is a great question, and I don't have that answer because they are still working on it. So the researchers are Dr. Rob Furl and Dr. Annalisa Paul from the University of Florida, and they're hoping to present the data at a future conference. And I will, of course, tweet and put that out into the social media verse once it's available, but they are still working on those results. So I don't have them yet.
Understood. Thank you. Rachel says, flights are very expensive. Will the price eventually come down such that the average person, non-millionaires and billionaires can someday fly?
Yep, that is the hope. And that's one thing I mentioned, that we're now working on a fleet of spacecraft. It's not going to be something that just happens every few months. We're hoping to see flights. We're hoping to see 400 flights a year. And as we increase flight cadence, as well as look at the technology behind it, come up with more efficient manufacturing practices, more efficient, and cost-effective technologies, which is something that companies should always be doing moving forward, not just you develop a product. So as all of that happens, we are hoping to see that price come down. And from the researcher side, if anybody is wanting to fly as a researcher with their payload or their science, there are a lot of grants out there. NASA does a flight opportunities program grant that actually funds the researcher to fly with their science or their technology development payload. And we're hoping to see more and more of those opportunities. So anybody that wants to do science, research, and hopefully education moving forward, there are funding opportunities for that.
Amazing. That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah.
We have a question from Eric Shear, who's one of the Deaf Astro Access ambassadors. He asks, can you comment on how important it is to hear on this flight?
So I will be upfront. This is probably the best, the question is probably the best for our chief medical officer. But that being said, for every person that we fly, it's not a one size fits all. Our chief medical officer, Dr. Tara Castleberry, her team, and our chief astronaut instructor, Beth Moses, sit down with the crew that is going to be going on this next flight and come up with the training that is the best suited for them. So it's not you don't get a manual that says this is your training. What I found really awesome was it was very interactive. We sat down and talked about not only what the training was going to consist of, but even before that, we talked about what is the goals. So like, what are you trying to accomplish on this flight so that they can help get you there? And also, what are you anxious about? What do you think you're going to have difficulty with? So we actually had before we started and before we got on site, this conversation so that our team could actually create a training program based on your personal experience and your personal preferences. So I'm sorry I did not answer it directly, but I will. I'm happy to get our chief medical officer in a conversation in the future.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. Shelby asks, I was looking at the website for your company and noticed that most of the jobs are for engineers. Can someone who has no experience with engineering, mathematics, and science still find a career here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the really amazing part of commercial space in general. They're businesses. Businesses, I know there's a lot of engineers that are great business people, but not all of them. Our company encompasses everything. It encompasses, of course, the engineering side, but we have a DC office that's policy focused. We have our training. We have training, we have law, we have our people team, and we also have baristas. Like, it's so cool. Like, we have everybody at our company. So it's not just engineering backgrounds. We are, in the sense of business as well, that is looking at doing quite a lot more. And it's really an experience built around spaceflight as opposed to the spaceflight itself. And of course, we have Galactic Unite, which is focused on education. So we're always looking for people wanting to help us with outreach. So yes, there are lots of different jobs. I know they pop up intermittently. So I would keep checking the site, but of course, if there's something you're particularly interested in, please reach out to me and I'm happy to take a look and see if that's something our company is looking for.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Carmen asks, does Virgin Galactic have any STEM projects to prepare future astronauts focused in the Caribbean?
So that's a great question. We haven't launched our STEM. We have a great STEM program in Galactic Unite. We haven't launched our payload side yet, so we haven't flown any education payloads. But if you look at Galactic Unite, incredible organization. It provides grants for students wanting to get into the space industry, provides grants for students wanting to work with Virgin Galactic, as well as curriculum for students that want to learn a little bit more about space in general. So we have that. They have their own site, Galactic Unite. Again, if you would like more information, please reach out to me. And my email is literally my first name my last name at virgingalactic.com. So it's very, very easy, hopefully very easy to remember if you guys have any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We have another question here asking more about the research you were conducting. They ask, could you tell us what the researchers were trying to learn from the genetically modified plants? Do these plants have the same characteristics as natural unmodified plants under multiple scenarios of this flight?
Yeah, so again, I don't know the results of the experiment, but Annalisa and Rob have done quite a lot of work on understanding just basically the fundamentals of these plants, not only to look at whether they can create plants that adapt to the microgravity environment so that astronauts going to further and further destinations have the ability to easily grow their own food, look at, and if we go to other destinations and set up shop there, how we can utilize environments to have plants adapt to, provide, again, fresh food or other items. But I found that also by just looking at how plants react to some of the adverse environments, adverse conditions, they're learning so much about just the basic fundamentals of some of these plants to even look at how they're going to react to some of the more adverse conditions happening on Earth. And if there's a way to look at using some of this data to modify plants that are able to survive some of the harsher climates that we're seeing, in the hopes of providing more food security in some areas. So what, they are focused on, understanding the fundamentals of plants in microgravity and science, deep space, and for those kinds of missions, but they're learning a lot about how it applies on Earth as well. So it is quite a large area that they cover. They're the best astrobotanists I know, so definitely would encourage you to look them up. They are amazing.
Fantastic. We have another question here from Lisa, who says, Sirisha, thank you for your support in government affairs and legislation with aerospace. The FAA and space industry is rapidly changing, and there is a need for more women and Jedi, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion in government affairs, legislation, and legislation for the space industry. What recommendation would you extend to individuals who have participated in international government affairs and legislation on planet Earth, but would like to be more involved with the space industry, aerospace, and interplanetary affairs?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say join us. We need you. Honestly, it's not so unique. This is coming from an engineer that jumped into policy that knew nothing about policy. It really is. I think it's always great to have an infusion of fresh perspectives and fresh ideas from people coming from other sectors, other areas of business. Sometimes aerospace, we kind of are in a bubble and talk about the same issues and think about the same perspectives. And I don't think that there's any disadvantage at all coming from a different sector and coming into aerospace and space policy. Of course, you'll learn the history, you'll learn what's going on currently, but I think you could jump into it and, be good to go. And I always welcome the fresh perspective, especially as aerospace for our industry. We are going to be, if not already, a global industry. We talk about U.S. Leadership in the commercial space industry, but it shouldn't be just the U.S. There's international collaborations. Companies are interested in flying people from all over the world, even flying from different destinations outside the U.S. So it's especially from international policy to aerospace policy would be, your skill set would be great.
Fantastic. I have a question from Darren, who says, sort of related to the research tendon, has there been any research on joints, mobility, and or connective tissue disorders in space? I thought I had to give up my dreams of going to space until today, but I feel re-inspired from this conference. Thank you so much, Darren. We're really excited to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a little bit out of my expertise, but I know the answer is yes. We haven't done it on SpaceShip yet. And I say yet because there are a lot of researchers that have approached us with ideas and work that they'd like to conduct on our vehicle. And a majority of them are looking at the human body and how it reacts to space, how we can increase comfortability so that we can increase access for people to space. But from what you are interested in, I definitely know that those kinds of, that kind of work has been done from NASA and other or research organizations.
Amazing. And I personally have a kind of related question on that topic. I'm curious, as someone who just came from space, do you have any thoughts on, what you think the primary modifications would need to be in that type of spacecraft in that type of spacecraft to allow for better access for astronauts with disabilities? So when we're thinking about future astronauts who might use wheelchairs here on Earth or have some type of mobility disability or who are blind or deaf, what are your thoughts on, the primary things that we would need to be modifying to ensure access for those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will just say that I was completely surprised, maybe not completely surprised, but I was surprised with how smooth the ride was, if that's the right word. It's always weird to say smooth when you're talking about a rocket, but the ride itself was smooth. And I did not feel disoriented or nauseous. During the flight. So that was great for me because I was able to basically unclip my seatbelt and get started on some work. And I can't say that was the case when I flew parabolic. I always needed some time to get oriented, kind of get myself feeling okay after the first two parabolas. So I think there's a little bit of an advantage there. And I think it was Sherry that was talking on the last panel about also how silent it was. That was very surprising for me. So we were able to, we didn't use our comm units, we were talking. It was very easy to communicate otherwise. And of course, you're in arm's length to your crewmate. So I was able to reach over and grab Colin. It was actually one of my test points. I was able to reach over and grab him. So obviously there's going to be some modifications needed, and right off the bat, it'll probably be entry into the spacecraft. Because at the moment you basically step into the vehicle. But I think it's, it will be part of some of the training measures that we do. I don't think it's going to be like a big modification of our vehicle. So depending on the person, we can talk about different methods of entry and exit, different methods of moving about the spacecraft, which for me was very easy to move around the spacecraft because there is quite a lot to grab. There's always something that you can grab to move yourself and orient yourself. So I would say it's probably, it depends on the person, but I don't think there's going to be a huge change. But the only way to do it is to start working on it with the people, with the ambassadors, with this community. So it's definitely something that we as Galactic and we as the industry should be working with you on now. And we'd love to do that.
Amazing. We'd love to too. So that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for the future.
I am so excited for the future.
We do have a few hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute our first request here. So you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question now if I've just given you audio access.
Hello.
Hello.
That was a very nice, very inspiring talk. I'm also myself visually impaired, and I'm working on astrophysics right now. And my question is, it's a bit personal, so if it's okay if you don't want to answer, but what is the percentage of your vision? Because you mentioned at some point that you could look out of the window of the spacecraft. So this the first part, and the second part is how difficult you think that could be for someone who is totally blind to work in a spacecraft.
Yeah. So the first question, so I'm corrected to like I'm like my eyesight has been corrected from contacts. So I don't have any visual impairment with my contacts. I'm not allowed to get LASIK, so I will always be wearing glasses and contacts, and that's fine for our vehicle. So any sort of aids in that sense are fine to fly with. Well, of course, we'll have to go through with a chief medical officer. So hopefully that was what you were asking for the first part of your question. And if not, please let me know. And the second, it's again, moving about the cabin itself is pretty easy. You'll always have something to hold on to, whether it's the windows, the seats, the person next to you. Looking out the window, Earth is quite bright. It's an incredible view because our vehicle actually orients itself such that it flips over on its belly. So our vehicle has a bunch of circular windows, and on its way up, it flips over. And so that all of the windows have Earth, basically a big portion of Earth bright right there. So no matter what window you're at, it's very hard to not even just like as you're moving, it's very hard to not even like get a glimpse of it. It's always in some window, some orientation. So so it really will be dependent on who the person is, which we could probably try to even get it to a certain window. If you're trying to conduct research or certain tasks, that'll all be choreographed ahead of time. So as part of your training, if you are trying to accomplish anything in particular during the flight, you will be sitting down with our chief astronaut trainer, and she will be working with you on the entire flight. So I hope I answered your question a little bit, but I would love to hear if I did.
This is okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I have another question here for you. Carmen asks, how do policymakers balance commercial interests and the idea that space in the night sky belong to humanity?
Yeah, so I think in everything that we do as commercial companies, we have a responsibility to be keep space sustainable. So it's definitely, I want to say a balancing act. It's a duty, right? I don't think you ever want to put commercial interests so far ahead in the sense that you are going to not create an environment that's sustainable for different people, different ventures, science, research. So for us and as an industry, that's something that should always be a part of the discussions that we have, whether it's the point of the policy proposal or not. It should be something that is being weighed regardless. So I think it should always be part of the discussion. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Amrita, I saw you had your hand raised. So if you'd like to ask your question out loud, you can go ahead and unmute and go ahead and ask.
Hello.
Hello.
So I want to know how can you make space travel more accessible to countries that are poor and don't have access to space, and they don't have access to space technology and don't have access to space in general?
Yeah, Amrita, thank you. That's a great question. I think commercial space is actually a really good way. I shouldn't say commercial space. Spaceflight in general should be an international collaboration as we go to further destinations, as we do audacious things. Commercial space companies provide the ability the capability for countries to. They don't need to have their own space program to fly people to space or fly research or science or education payloads to space.
Because it says on the NASA website that you have to be a US citizen to be an astronaut, or
Yeah, so I think there's two parts. There's one is the collaboration. So for me, I honestly, the ability to fly on a parabolic flight when I was a student just was like incredible. And I think being able to fly student payloads to space will have an incredible impact for students to actually design, build payloads, send it to space, and then hold it in their own hands. So I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities there, and there's collaboration within NASA and other agencies to do that. And then from the human side, sorry, just real quick, from the human side, for commercial space, you don't have to be a US citizen. So you don't have to be a US citizen to fly on Galactic or Blue or SpaceX. So they're offering opportunities for countries that don't have astronauts or a national space program to be able to fly. So sorry, I think I cut you off. Please continue.
So do you, wait, I think I forgot the question. Wait, what are payloads?
Oh, sorry, I should, yeah, thank you for calling me out on that. So payloads are just any objects you would like to fly to space. Typically what we fly are developed by research organizations or universities to either test technologies, like, for example, we flew a payload, which was basically this box that looked at how future landers could land on different celestial objects. So they used our flight because of the microgravity time that they get to test technologies for landing on different planets. But so that's an example of a payload. It's basically any object that you want to fly to space that's not a human.
And one thing, I know this is a bad question, but how do you poop or use the bathroom in space?
We actually don't have a bathroom in our vehicle. So our vehicle is our whole flight is 90 minutes. So we have other methods if you need it, but we don't have a physical bathroom in SpaceShip.
But you do in the space station.
We do. So there is a bathroom in the space station. I've heard my astronaut friends talk about it all the time, but I'm not a big fan of that. So I haven't really paid attention to the question. Bodily fluids. I'm just one of those people that gets like queasy when I see blood and bodily fluids. So I do not know the answer of the space toilet on ISS as I should, even though I've heard the answer many times.
So what are the satellites made of? Do you use them with Arduino and special technologies, or how do you make the satellites and send them to space?
So we don't actually build satellites. We actually have a sister company called Virgin Orbit that does small satellite launch. Which I think is incredible. Now, like small sats are literally, you can send a phone up as a satellite. It's ridiculously cool what capability satellites.
What can a phone satellite do?
Oh, well, so actually, you know who you should ask is you have a keynote speaker coming up, Chris Boschman, who's a co-founder of Planet Labs. And he actually started Planet Labs with Robbie and a few other people with something called a phone sat. So I will have you ask that question to Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita. Thank you, Sirisha. And I think we have time for maybe one more question here. It might be nice to end, Sirisha, on any advice you have for aspiring space explorers, especially if folks, like some of the folks in our chat who maybe have thought previously that space was not accessible to them. It seems to me like commercial space is opening new doors and new opportunities that previously a lot of folks thought were closed. And so I'd love to know if you have any thoughts or advice to give to our listeners who may want to know your input on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I talk about going to space and human spaceflight quite a lot because it's what inspired me. That being said, space itself is such a wide-ranging industry, from what NASA's doing to landing on other planets and celestial bodies to what we're doing in terms of sending more and more humans to space. So it's really find what inspires you. It's different for everybody. I know I talk about how being an astronaut inspired me, but it's all started at Star Trek. It really involves. So really find what inspires you. It honestly may not even be directly space flight. It could be something on Earth that you utilize space to further develop, which I think is just what we're seeing more and more. The people coming into our industry aren't always inspired by seeing someone fly to space. They're inspired by a question, inspired by curiosity around a topic that has led them to space. So my advice is find what inspires you, find what excites you, and pursue that. And my biggest piece of advice: find a mentor. Mentors have shaped my career in a way that has had such a big impact. Having someone in industry that you're able to ask questions to get advice from is invaluable. That's all right. I'll leave with, I hope everyone is able to, pursue their dreams, get inspired, but find a mentor to help them along the way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sirisha, for being here today and sharing your experience with us. That was so fascinating. And we really appreciate you joining us for the first keynote of SciAxis 2021. Thank you so much.